Welcome, welcome, welcome to Engage. Welcome to Engage, opening conversations around racial equity and mental health. I am Kim Reynolds, a community outreach and training specialist here at the Mental Health Association in New Jersey for the Families of Color program, and I am your host for today. We normally have two of us. Faith, in her absence, wishes us well, and she will be here next month to help support Engage. Well, the mental health, what is that? I'm so glad to ask what the Mental Health Association in New Jersey is all about. We're a statewide nonprofit organization that strives for children and adults to achieve victory over mental health and substance use disorders through advocacy, education, training, and services. The FOC, or Families of Color program, addresses mental health issues on multiple levels by creating a mixture of virtual and direct family support services to increase awareness of the barriers facing families of color. I work also with the Community Education Department and the Pews, promoting emotional wellness and spirituality, and we help address mental health issues within the communities of color. So very happy to have you here. And our guest, and I am super excited about our guest. But let me just tell you really quickly also just a little bit more about Engage, because if this is your first time, I really want you to know that this is a 1-hour Zoom programmed event, and it's launched specifically to help set a pathway for behavioral health for people, healthcare for people of color. This program is designed to support administrative and frontline staff members of human service providers and community organizations who may come in contact with persons who may need mental health services but aren't necessarily trained in mental health works. Through this free interactive program, the Mental Health Association in New Jersey will help prepare them to engage in conversations with adults, adolescents, and families of color about mental health. Further, we will help enable staff members to take the next step in assessing and addressing, supporting them and engaging them, and facilitating connections to get the help that they need. We'll provide training resources and information and offer ongoing support for these endeavors. After each program, participants will walk away with the solid skills and strategies for mental health resources and new contacts to collaborate with. We ask if you're here, you're more than welcome to put in the chat where you're from, what county you're in, and any of the services as far as a link to how we can get in touch with you, or how the people that are also on with us today can get in touch with you. So who's our guest? Let's see, who is our guest? Our guest today, which I'm so excited to introduce, is Shavonne Davis. She's a victim witness advocate. She's having a topic today of engaging victims of crime who are people of color to receive mental health services. So I'm going to stop my share and I'm going to put on Shavonne. Where are you? Oh, there you are. There you are. How are you?
Good afternoon, Kim. Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing well. Thanks so much for inviting me on board today.
My pleasure. We got tons of questions. So I'm going to just jump right in. But first, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Again, my name's Shavonne Davis. So I studied forensic psychology. I got my master's in that at John Jay, and I went off to become somewhat of a mental health advocate. I have been a victim witness advocate at the Atlantic County Prosecutor's Office for about 3 years now. And outside of that, I do a lot of work with National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, a lot of volunteer work, just trying to dispel that mental health stigma and spread awareness.
Thank you very much, Siobhan. I appreciate that. So if anybody has any questions, remember to save them for the end, or you can put them in the chat when at the end of the interview, we're going to have time for that. So what is a victim's witness advocate? What is it and what does it do? What do you do?
What is a victim witness advocate? So I am very similar to a social worker within the criminal justice system. So I act as a liaison between the prosecutor who is going to prosecute these criminal cases and the actual crime victims. So typically, if you are a victim of a crime, you would interact with a victim witness advocate within 24 to 72 hours after the crime. I would get in contact with you, I'd introduce myself and give you an overview of what the criminal justice system looks like. A lot of people they are not asking to be victims of crimes, and a lot of people have never had to brush with the criminal justice system. So a lot of people don't know what to expect. Most people, their experience with the criminal justice system comes from what they see on television. They're thinking CSI, they're thinking Law and Order. So I'm there just to give a little dose of reality, dispel some of those myths, and make the process a lot less mysterious for them. So I am going to connect them with the resources that they need, mental health services, because I am a mental health professional, but I'm not necessarily treating. So I want to connect them with those services, with services to help with anything that they need in terms of utilities, if they're struggling financially, if they're disadvantaged in that way, and really just anything that deals with the effects of the crime.
Thank you. You know, when I think about that, Law and Order is the only thing that's in my head. You know, SVU. I don't. You watch these television shows, and you have this particular perception of what things are supposed to look like because, you know, as far as we know, the average Joe, you know, this is
Of course,
mirroring what we're supposed to see, right?
that's fair. I think so.
So also, next question for you. What are, because we're talking about, we're here representing, talking about the BIPOC community, right? And this month is BIPOC month, so I'm really happy that we're doing this show. What are some of the systemic barriers that victims of crime who are from the BIPOC community face as it regards to accessing mental health treatment?
That is a fantastic question. When thinking about that, specifically in the Black community, Black Americans have been known to report more symptoms of persistent emotional distress than their white counterparts.
Mm-hmm.
Yet only 1 in 3 will actually receive the mental health treatment that they need. And when you think about the experience of being Black in the US, the microaggressions, systemic racism, general lack of access to resources, the prevalence of the symptoms begins to make more sense. And there's just such a startling lack of mental health resources for Black individuals and people of color, people in the BIPOC community in general. And it goes hand in hand with the general barriers to healthcare that they already experience. The first obstacle in my eyes would be getting them to actually acknowledge that they're experiencing a mental health crisis and that it would greatly improve with treatment. So a large obstacle is mental health stigma. And it's so prevalent in the African American community. It's just not something that is commonly acknowledged. Faith and church, they're very foundational in the Black community and the African American community. And so often there are individuals who believe that if you're experiencing any sort of mental health systems, you are to rely solely on prayer, solely on faith. And labeling it depression, labeling it post-traumatic stress disorder is just not appropriate. You can just pray it away. I'm a big proponent of why not do both? Why not do everything? You know, use faith as a protective factor and just use it to kind of propel you on the healing journey in concordance with therapy. So other than that stigma, once they actually do try to seek the treatment, the barriers can become getting on these really long wait lists for general clinics that exist for universal health care plans or those without insurance. And then when they do get treatment, sometimes it's experiencing discrimination, prejudice from a provider who is not culturally competent, or the crime victim being treated like an object in a factory lineup. And it usually comes from providers who are usually very overworked and who likely become very jaded. And unfortunately, that can lead to them exhibiting really no compassion or empathy to the client, which is, of course, harmful to the healing process. And that's why I try to do my best to make sure that the system doesn't fail them. And for crime victims specifically with no health insurance, that fortunately is not a problem. We work very, very closely with a state agency called Victims of Crime Compensation Office, and we call it VCCO for short. It is a fantastic state agency. If you are a victim of a crime, for example, an aggravated assault, and you have to go to the hospital, you are racked with hundreds, thousands of dollars in hospital bills and follow-up appointments, and you have absolutely no insurance. If you apply through the Victims of Crime Compensation Office, likely they're going to be able to cover the entirety of your bill. The same with mental health treatment as well. For providers that are out of network, if they're private, those that have shorter wait lists, that's completely fine. That's not out of the question for you, and it's not out of reach for our BIPOC crime victims. So they can apply through the VCCO to have their mental health treatment covered, no matter who that provider is. So I always sing VCCO's praises, just because it's fantastic, and it gives a lot of people more access than they already have. And just in general, research has shown that specifically Black individuals, they forge a stronger and more successful therapeutic connection with providers from the same cultural background. But I mean, how many of us are really even treating and providing in mental health? There's such a dearth there, and there's such a need. And research shows that we do better with that cultural connection. Of course, we can't choose our skin color, our background. So all of us should be able to work well with the diverse population that we're presented. So cultural competency, I believe, is just so important. And although I'm not giving treatment, I do feel like that cultural connection is just so important. I've gotten feedback from victims that I've worked with, just telling me that it means so much to them to see a person that looks like them in my position that's able to help them.
Absolutely. I was thinking about when you said about the cultural competency piece. I've just recently had an opportunity to have a discussion with a gentleman who was a faith leader. And I was just saying that as a part of the Pews program, promoting emotional wellness and spirituality, we like to come into the churches and talk to people about mental health and how you can have a pill and a prayer. And literally, it's 2022. And he said to me, and I quote, because he was talking about an office that he was running in Newark as far as a support system for people that were homeless, that he only advocates for prayer. He said, unless they, I'm not kidding you, like this is like 2 weeks ago. He said, unless they have a physical problem and are on medication for that, they only pray. And I was just astounded. I was just like flabbergasted, because it's still here. And this is, and it actually,
I'm befuddled.
I'm befuddled too. And he happened to also not be a person of color.
Ah,
So this was like,
wow, okay.
So it really needs to be addressed. And so when you're talking about cultural competency, really
Yes.
understanding a person that has that level of faith and how to, I know, right, Rose? How
Very
to
prevalent still.
address the faith in conjunction with getting treatment for mental health. You know, that was like, when you said that, I was like, oh my goodness, I can't wait to tell you. I wasn't waiting, but I was waiting.
I know. I thank you so much for sharing that. And with you saying that, it also just makes me think that he wants to pray other than he needs to see like a physical ailment. And I feel like just in general in our country, with the stigma for mental health, I think that's why people have such a difficult time with acknowledging that it's still an illness. It's still part of your general health system.
Absolutely.
You can't see it, so it must not be that important. But it's just like having an actual sickness and actual illness. It's just as well a part of our health. It needs to be treated as such.
Yes. And so getting down to the treatment. So what are some of the strategies that you think we can use to start dismantling some of these barriers?
So we already touched on cultural competency. And just as mental health professionals and those working in mental health fields, the more you speak up and speak out about the importance of cultural competency in general, the more likely agencies will be to actually genuinely acknowledge its importance and begin to actually start implementing it within its trainings and systems. A lot of agencies, they are spouting diversity, inclusion, equity. These are their initiatives. Just from what I've seen, my personal opinion, I feel like it's mostly nominal and nothing is really put into place. So the more that you interact with clients and you speak up about their needs and their needs for cultural competency, I believe that that's when the cultural competency can actually start being implemented more. And I would also recommend getting as familiar as you can with the local resources, as familiar as possible, not just, looking at the list. Call them, figure out who specializes in which areas, and really listen to the clients or the people that you're working with. Listen to their feedback. If you send them to someone and they're telling you that specific provider or therapist, like, I kind of got the vibe that they don't like working with people of color, don't send anyone else there. Just pop them off your list and see if you can find somebody else that's a better fit. And definitely show you care by following up. Ensure that they are calling the right people. A lot of times they seem tenuous, or they'll say, yeah, I'll call a mental health provider. I'll do it. A lot of times they're not actually going to do it. When you show that you care by saying, hey, have you done that yet? You really need to do that. I care about you. I want you to get better. You sometimes even go the extra mile by calling on their behalf if you have a couple of minutes. That can be incredibly helpful. And just listening, empathizing, reassuring, validating, and not passing any judgment as best as you can. I know we're humans and we are wrought with bias, but just keep it in here and try not to let it speak through your actions.
You sure you didn't take QPR? We were just talking before everybody showed up with the QPR's question, persuade and refer, a suicide gatekeeping training program training that we have, and those are some of the techniques that we talk about. Really, just being willing to listen and making sure that when you do support a person, that you have time for this person, time to support this person, and getting whatever support or treatment that they need. So that's excellent, Shavonne. Thank you so much for that.
Absolutely.
Couple more questions. We're getting there almost. Let's see here. How can families support victims of crime so that they can receive mental health treatment?
Oh, that's a great question. And that is so important. Families and support systems are integral to the healing journey of crime victims. So often crime victims are ignored. And I think, Kim, I was speaking to you about this with you and Faith, that the criminal justice system is actually built for the rehabilitation of defendants or the people who are accused of the crimes. They're built for their rights, their rehabilitation, which shouldn't be shirked whatsoever. However, there's really not much in place for victims. So they often get left feeling alone and unacknowledged, which is why I feel so validated in my job. But I can't be there with them to support them all the time. It's the family members. They're going to be the ones to really experience and notice those changes in behavior after experiencing a crime, and the mental state of the crime victim. They'll notice if the individuals are more withdrawn, if their eating habits have increased or decreased dramatically, if they're engaging in more risky behaviors. They're the ones who are going to be right up close with that. And I don't know if you all are familiar with the 5 love languages, the 5 communication styles that are usually within a romantic partnership to help you better connect with your loved one. I think that these love languages can be expanded way beyond the romantic dynamic. And for victims of crime, I feel that words of affirmation and acts of service are probably two of the most important love languages that a loved one, family member, friend, support system can help a crime victim with. So those words of affirmation, letting them know that they are enough, that they are going to be okay, and that you are there to support them. And acts of service is probably going to be the biggest one. When you're a crime victim, usually this is coming out of nowhere. I've had victims, they're on their morning jog, and boom, a drunk driver just hits them as a pedestrian. Their entire life has changed. They are out of work. The insurance is piling up all of these papers and applications, and it takes so much energy just to even acknowledge what has happened. So them blending all of their energy to actually dealing with what's going on mentally, that's what they're going to need their energy for. So for a family member and a loved one to step in and say, insist, let me help you with this application. Let me help you with this. Let me make sure that everything is in line. The little menial tasks like that just don't seem very important, they're very, very important. And you don't understand how appreciated they would be. And I accompany crime victims to court, to their court cases. So usually court cases are open 1 to 3 years, which is not great news to tell everyone. I like to say that sometimes I'm also a professional bearer of bad news, just because on Law and Order, on CSI, everything happens so quickly. There's a murder, it's solved in the next week, and he's in jail for life. Nothing like that is ever going to happen. And there's so many harsh realities of the criminal justice system, in terms of 90 to 95% of cases will resolve with a plea bargain. So a defendant getting offered a more favorable sentence instead of actually taking it to trial and arguing it in front of a jury. That is very unlikely to happen. And life sentences, we don't really give those anymore. You have got to do a whole lot to be locked away for life. And this can be very disappointing to victims, and it can be such an inhibitor to their closure and that retribution that they feel that they need. So having a family member come to court with them, support them, is so important. And also sometimes their mind is just so inundated with trauma, they don't know what's going on. I'm telling them the same thing all the time, which that's my job. Of course I'll do that, but having another set of eyes and ears is also so helpful, to say, hey, remember you were supposed to fill that out, or hey, remember that the next case is in a couple weeks. Yeah. And then just remembering as a family member that recovery is not linear. So just because they seem great one day and maybe they're not bringing up the crime anymore, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily cured for the better. And you need to be concerned if maybe they seem to regress a little bit a couple days later. Just know that is typical. It's usually going to be a cycle, and you will be appreciated just for being there as a sense of support.
Absolutely. And so because recovery, is a process, and they're recovering from this crime, two things, and I have two quick questions. And time flies when you're having fun, because it's zooming along here, and I could talk to you for hours. This is so great. One of the things that I wanted to ask about, as we're helping our family member, and maybe they might, on this road to recovery, become triggered. Like, what do we do when they've become triggered?
That's a great question, because triggers can pop up at the most unexpected times. And crime victims don't necessarily have to have a post-traumatic stress disorder diagnosis to experience these triggers and become affected by them. So really, really just being there for them. And if you think that it's inhibiting just their well-being, making sure that they really make the contact to get into that mental health treatment, because the triggers, they're going to keep happening, they're going to keep occurring. But if it's, I would say, if it's inhibiting their entire behavior, they don't want to go outside because they're afraid of seeing a car, if were involved in a car accident and it's 6 months after the incident, honestly 3 months after the incident, I think you need to insist that they get some help.
Few questions coming up in the chat, and we're going to discuss those in just a moment. One question before we close, and I'm going to first, before the question, give you a disclosing statement, because you talk about CSI and SVU and all the rest of that stuff, and truly that's where my mind went. So when you mentioned about someone being hit by a car, just a regular pedestrian, I was like, oh, like, that, why didn't that pop into my head? So
Right.
there's so many ways that a person can be the victim of a crime.
Yes, absolutely. Did you want to know, like, just kind of more of the crime victims that I service?
You can ask, it's let it be a double question. So the kinds of crime victims that you do service, and also I'm taking it that you do work with one individual for the length of time that they're going through this experience.
Yes. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. We have the same person. We're working on the same case because we work so hard to build that rapport and build that sense of trust and support. So I mean, sometimes we'll switch out. Like if I'm not there, another one of the advocates I know will be able to adequately cover for me. But generally, we're sticking with the same family, the same crime victims throughout the entirety of the process. And it's been very, very interesting, especially considering how long some of these cases can go.
No.
Yeah.
And the kinds of cases that you come up with?
So the kinds of cases, they really run the gamut. So we have assault by auto, people who are hit by drunk drivers as pedestrians, as bicyclists, or just driving on the road. Victims of home burglaries, victims of robberies. Because I work in Atlantic County, bulk of the victims are usually coming from out of state just to enjoy themselves in Atlantic City. And they're maybe inebriated and really enjoying themselves in the casino. And unfortunately, they're running into some people who don't have their best interests in mind. So that's a lot of the victim group that I service. Carjackings, a lot of domestic violence. That is a huge part of what I do. Sexual assault victims, both adults and children. Children is incredibly difficult, but also very, very rewarding. And for homicide victims, I support their families. So those families who lose someone to a shooting, to a domestic violence incident, I would accompany them to court and make sure that they're getting the services that they need and support them throughout the entire process. And very recently, victims of drug-related deaths, so overdoses. We just started investigating those. And that is also very difficult to help family members with. To sometimes they don't want to acknowledge that their loved one was an addict, and they don't really know where to place the blame. So yeah, it really runs the gamut.
Wow, this is amazing. I'm gonna I'm gonna talk to Rose. We're gonna have to have you back again because more information and more know-hows and more how-tos and more of you. So thank you very much. Do you have any closing words for our viewers?
Just thank you so much for having me, because I feel like this is such a niche that's not acknowledged very often, crime victims, and their mental health is so heavily impacted. So I just want to thank everyone for signing up and giving me your time and attention today.
Yes, thank you. This month is BIPOC month, so New Jersey MHA&J celebrates BIPOC communities. July is this month right here, Black, Indigenous, People of Color. Beyond the numbers, that's the slogan right now. Please, if there's anything or any more information, please look at our website, and I'm going to show it to you in just a moment. This is a free event. BIPOC Messages of Hope and Celebration. This is put on by our Community Education Department and the Director of Development in that area, part of that area, Lynette Sheard, and she is going to be with July's BIPOC Mental Health Month. It's designed to be an creative expression of celebration and vibrancy. So live performances. This is going to be taking place. Where is it? I know where it is. It doesn't. Oh, there you go. 4 Boland Drive, West Orange, New Jersey, at OSPAC. All right, it's going to be July 31st, 12 to 3. Come out and join us. No cost emotional support from trained staff. No insurance is required. You want to call 866-202-HELP or 4357, or text NJ Hope to 51684, 7 days a week, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Thank you so much to the Mental Health Association in New Jersey. I'm so grateful that this is where I work, and this is who's putting on this program so that we have all this wonderful information. Have a great, great day. Thank you.